This week's Parsha's Toldos, begins with Rivka marrying Rivka, and the Torah tells us in Pasuk Chav Beis, verse 22, that we know they couldn't have kids, and they were praying, and they were both praying to have kids. They went into their own corners, and the Torah says, "Vayitzrotusu habanim b'kirba," and the children were agitated inside her. Vatomer in Cain is with all this pain. Lama zeh why do I need this? Vatelech lidrosh es Hashem. So Torah talks about the pain of Rivka's childbirth. She prayed to Daven. She prayed. She was like all the other imahos. They couldn't have children, and she prayed because God wanted the prayer of the imahos. And now she became pregnant. It's vayitzrotu habanim b'kirba. As we'll see, as we'll see from the answer, that there are going to be two kids, of Yaakov and Esau. So there's a famous question the world asks is, we know we have a tradition that before a person is born, an angel comes and teaches the baby in the womb, Kol HaTorah Kulo. So the question is, Rashi quotes that that when Rivka passed by a house of idol worship, Esav tried to jump out, and when Rivka passed by yeshiva, shul, so Yaakov jumped out. So that's why they were causing pain, or as the Bala Yitzer points out, just very pragmatically, Esav was very hairy, so Yaakov kept on pushing him away. But here the case is, we see that Yaakov is trying to get out and learn Torah at the yeshiva. Perhaps the yeshiva Sheva Aver, we'll see. So the question developed there is, why was Yaakov trying to get out and learn? If we know we have a tradition, you have the greatest teacher, you have a malach teaching you Kol HaTorah Kulo, the whole Torah. So what is he running to get out? So the belt answers, with a chavrusa like Esav, you want out of there. With a learning partner like Esav, you want out. In other words, we see the importance of a good chavrusa. Of course, a good share is important, and that's why when we discussed the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, if there's a conflict, we know there's on one hand there's a mitzvah to learn as many hours as possible, the Maisa Limud, and there's another mitzvah of Yedias HaTorah, accumulating knowledge. Usually the more hours you put in, the more knowledge you'll accumulate. However, let's say you have a case where you have a place to learn a block away, and you have a place to learn an hour away. And you like the Rabbi in another yeshiva or in a different town. And you're going to learn more in 3 hours of learning in this yeshiva than you would in 6 hours of learning. So the post can point out that the Yedias HaTorah trumps out. Wherever you're going to learn the most, that's where you should go. So granted, he had the best Rabbi in the world. He had an angel teaching him Kol HaTorah Kulo. Yet we see the importance of a chavrusa, good chavrusa, getting the right learning partner. Sometimes it could be just as important as the shiur, and sometimes even more important. So it's vayitzrotu habanim b'kirba. So what's the pshat here? Im kein lama zeh anochi. So there are many explanations, maybe for another time. Rashi, there's the Klei Yakar, the Gra. We'll focus on the Brisker Rav. And Rav Chaim Volozhin has a similar idea that the Brisker Rav works with, and as we'll see in his answer. So what's the pshat in the Gemara, in the Torah? Lama zeh nochi, what do I need it? So there's a interesting Gemara in Brachas, and Yudam and Aleph. It's a story between Yeshaya and Chizkiyahu. And basically, that Chizkiyahu is on his deathbed, and there's a discussion who should visit who. Well, it's pretty hard to go, but because Yeshaya is a Navi, Chizkiyahu Melech's the Melech, who gets precedence? Either way, God told Yeshaya Navi to go visit Chizkiyahu. So it says, Kol Amar Hashem Svosei Laveischa Ki Meisata V'Losechia. So the pasuk says, for you are dying, Ki Meisata V'Losechia, you shall not live. So it's a double language. Obviously, if you're dying, then you're not going to live. They usually go together. So Gemara explains, Meis Ata Ba'olam Hazeh. You are dying refers to this world. Not only are you going to die now, but you're going to not have a chelak, you're not going to have a portion in the world to come. So upon hearing this prophecy, Chizkiyahu asks, Amalei, my kulei, what did I do that I was deserving of such a terrible penalty that I'm not going to get Olam Haba either? Amalei, Yeshaya Navi said, Bishano asakta bepira aribia, because you didn't involve yourself in the midst of having children. Amalei, Chizkiyahu said to him, Bishum dechazi li, I have a good reason why. You think I just didn't want to have kids? I'd love to have kids. But you know why I didn't have kids? Bishum dechazi li baruach hakodesh, because I saw through ruach hakodesh, divine inspiration, the nafka minai benin delomala. I saw my kids are going to have not such good kids, at least some of them. Like Menashe, he knew he was going to have a Rasha who was unusually wicked, like the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us, and therefore he didn't want to have kids. So I wanted to have kids, but since I saw in divine inspiration I have wicked kids, I figured better not to have any kids than wicked ones. So Amalei, so Yeshaya said, Bahadi kavshei derachmana lamachach. Why do you concern yourself with the hidden things of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's none of your business. God gave you a mitzvah of pru ravu. The Torah gave us a mitzvah to be fruitful and multiply. That's your business. What you commanded to do, you must do. And whatever God says, that's what you do. It's not your choice to make. It's not a suggestion, pru ravu, it's a commandment. So Amalei, Chizkiyahu said after hearing this, okay, if that's the reason, Hashta Havli Brata, give me your daughter, and I'll have children. And Efsha the Garma Zechusa Didev Didak V'Nav Kiminai Banan Damalu. Perhaps if we put both our merits together, we'll end up getting good kids from it. I wouldn't have a Menashe. So Amalei, Yeshaya said, Kvar Nigzer Lagzera. What can I do? The decree of death already has been given. And therefore, marrying my daughter won't help anything. And I don't want my daughter to become a widow. So Amalei, Ben Amatz, Kalei Nevaska would say, okay, just get out. Finish, don't finish the Nevuah. It has to do with another principle about the concept of Nevuah. There's a concept of different prophecies. Nevuah Latova, Eino Choser. When you give a prophecy for good, it can never retract. But Nevuah Lara can. So, and the Rambam about making it a public prophecy. So, we'll give a separate share on this, but the bottom line is, as long as it's not made public, it's easier to take back. So he says, stop right there. And Yeshaya and Chizkiyahu said, what are you talking about? I have a tradition from my father's father, Avi Ava. Afilu cherev chada manuchas al savaro shel adam. Even if you have a sharp sword resting upon a person's neck, al yimna atzmo min harachamim. Never give up hope. So we know that. So that's the story with Yeshaya Hanavi and Chizkiyahu HaMelech. So the Brisker Rav says Chizkiyahu HaMelech's logic was sound. Why bring in kids? Better to bring in no one than to bring in wicked people. And by the way, in fact, he realized he'd have good kids also, but he thought the bad would outweigh the good, but he knew he was going to have good descendants as well, and yet he made his cheshbon that not to. In fact, that's how Rav Chaim Volozhin explains, that they point out that we know the Avos, we have a tradition, the Avos kept the Torah even before it was given. That the Gemara in Yuma, that Avram was Makayim Kol Torah Kulo, even Erev Tavshilin. We know by the other Avos as well, and we have questions. We'll give a whole share on this about the concept of the Avos accepting the Torah beforehand, and how do you deal with Yaakov marrying two sisters, etc. But there was a major difference with Chaim Volozhin explains. We do mitzvahs, we do them because we have to. God commands us, we do it. When the Avos kept the Torah, they kept it b'Torah eino mitzvah v'yoseh. They kept it as someone who's not commanded, like a woman who is exempt from time-oriented commandments, mitzvahs aseh shazman grama. It's praiseworthy to volunteer most mitzvahs, but she's doing it b'Torah eino mitzvah v'yoseh. She's exempt, and therefore she can't do the mitzvah for a man if she's exempt, if a man is obligated. So the Avos kept the Torah, but Torah eino mitzvah v'yoseh. And we know if you're keeping the Torah voluntarily, so then you have more flexibility. So they figured out, but Ruach HaKodesh, with divine inspiration, that certain mitzvahs aren't going to give the right result in heaven. So Yaakov figured out, even though I really shouldn't marry two sisters to the Torah, but in this scenario, I have to, because I have to create 12 tribes, and so on and so on. Each of the Avos had their own cheshbonos, and that was okay, because that was Kodem Matan Torah. Before Matan Torah, before the Torah was given, we had more flexibility. At some point out the concept of Aveira Lishma, doing Aveira for a good reason. So Kodem Matan Torah, that was certainly true. After Matan Torah, it's a little more difficult, because we have less flexibility. So they point out here, so the Brisker Rav says, really, what Chizkiyahu HaMelech was telling Yeshaya was correct. It doesn't make any sense to bring in Risham, and even if you have Tzaddikim, but the Sham will outweigh the Tzaddikim. So the Brisker Rav says, no, that's the pshat here. Im kein lama zeh anochi, why do I need all of this? I'm seeing Baruch HaKodesh. It's true I'm going to have Yaakov, but I'm going to have Esav also. Maybe better not to have any kids than to bring Esav into the world. And says, Lama zeh anochi. I'm not commanded in the mitzvah of having children. The mitzvah of Pru Ravu is on the man. As the Gemara tells us in Kedushin, that the Gemara learns out Pru Ravu v'kivshua. The Torah says, be fruitful and multiply, and you shall conquer the land. And the Gemara writes, it's a way of men to fight the wars and conquer the land. So the Gemara learns out, that's the way we paskin, this is a discussion, the Gemara we paskin, the mitzvah of Pru Ravu is on the man and not the woman. And the Meshech Chachma in Parshas Noach, he gives different reasons behind, what's the philosophy behind it. Why should it? If anything, it's counterintuitive. You would think one mitzvah, if there's going to be one mitzvah, a woman would be obligated, and you think it's having kids, since the woman has the kids. So how could it be that the woman has the kid, but it's not her obligation, it's the man's obligation? So the Meshech Chochmah explains Dirachecha Darchei Noam, that the Torah's ways are pleasant. And we all know, or especially women anyway, I know 'cause I had a kidney stone, so they say that's the equivalent of childbirth. But women know what the pain of childbirth is. And therefore it's supposed to be the most painful experience one can have. And therefore, since God's ways are pleasant, or God did not want to command such a mitzvah that involves so much pain. And therefore, and that's why He gave the woman a maternal instinct, a desire to have children, even with the pain. That's why we know the pain's so bad that the Gemara Chazal tell us, a woman says, oh, I'm never going to have another kid again after this. I can't go through this pain. That's why, even though having children, having a child is a good thing, she has to bring a korban. She has to bring a sacrifice because of what she said, that she's never going to have another child. But we see the pain of childbirth is terrible. And that's why God didn't want to command them directly. He put the commandment on the man. Obviously it has to happen through the woman. But He didn't want to command the woman directly because you don't want to command it something which has so much pain. And as well, the Meshech Chochmah points out also another psychological insight, that if a woman was commanded in Pru in having kids and she couldn't have kids, she'd have to divorce her husband. And let's say her husband she loves. So it would be a very difficult situation. You say, well, what about if a man has to divorce his wife? Let's say they can't have kids. And the answer is, biblically speaking, you don't have to divorce your wife. Biblically speaking, you have many wives. But a woman cannot have two husbands for obvious reasons, that you don't know who the father is, and the whole issue of yichus. So therefore, because of the psychological sorrow and chorus and distress, a woman has to divorce a man she loves to fulfill Puravu. Hence God put the mitzvah on the man, who in theory can have many wives, and not on the woman. So whatever the reason, the Meshech Chochmah gives a physical reason because of the pain, he didn't want to give it directly to the woman, or the psychological reason, as the Gemara says, it applies to a man. In fact, interesting, is a discussion, when exactly does the mitzvah of Puravu begin? When does a man become obligated in this mitzvah of having children? So usually mitzvahs begin at 13. When you turn 13, you have a mitzvah. That's very interesting. The mitzvah of tzitzis we do all the time, even when we're younger. But the minhag Ashkenaz of wearing a talis, that doesn't begin until we're married. But Sephardim begin at 13, which makes sense. Why do we begin when we're married? So that's some point out from the juxtaposition of the psukim, that the Torah tells us the mitzvah of tzitzis is put next to the mitzvah of getting married. So we learn out that the custom of not putting on a talis until you get married, even though during those days people used to get married much earlier. But nevertheless, normally mitzvahs begin at 13. So the question is, even though it says ben shmona shel chuppah in Pirkei Avos, but we assume the mitzvah to have children is when you turn 20, or in that range. The question is why? What's 20? Where do you get 20 from? Like why not 30? So the Torah Temima suggests, and others, that 20, because where do we find 20? That when you go to war, the men between 20 and 60, they give a matzah. That's how you did the count. You counted the men between 20 and 60. So since the obligation of Puravu is based on the kivshua, conquering, going to war, so since going to war, it begins at 20, the discussion, so you count the men between 20 and 60, so some suggest that's why the mitzvah you wait until 20. And that's why they also point out as well, in the Hasidic Sfarim they point out that we know a woman is exempt from Talmud Torah. Of course, there are many things a woman is obligated to learn. She has to know how to keep Shabbos, keep the laws of Nida, Taras HaMishpacha, keep Shabbos, kashrus, etc. So she has to learn those things. But in the learning in theory, just learning for the sake of learning per se, of course she gets the mitzvah if she does, and it's praiseworthy, but she's exempt. So the question is, why is a woman exempt from the pure mitzvah of Talmud Torah? That's what they say in the Chassidus Svara, because when we refer to learning, we talk about the Melchamto Shel Torah, the war, or you go into a Beis HaMedrash, you're fighting with each other. No, that's not what it means. What are you thinking? No way, it means this, etc. And it's like a Muhammad. We know women are exempt from Muhammad. So either way, the Torah, the Gemara tells us, explaining the Torah, the mitzvah Puravu, that a woman is exempt, and because of the kivshuha, because she doesn't fight the wars. It's part of conquering the world and populating the world. In fact, there's an interesting Meshech Chachma that says originally women were obligated in Puravu. He writes that originally it's written in Lashon Rabim in the plural, and then later on it's written in the singular, because originally, why a woman exempt from Puravu? Because of the pain of childbirth. So originally there wasn't supposed to be pain. It was only because of the sin of Adam and Chava, so God gave the pain of childbirth. In fact, that's why it's a minute among especially pregnant women after Sukkot that one eats from the esrog. Why? What's the minute based on to eat from the esrog tree? So the commentators explain that the different opinions of what was the Eitz Hadat, what was the forbidden fruit that they could eat. Christians say it was an apple. In Jewish tradition, we say it was grapes, maybe wheat. But one opinion is it was an esrog tree, and therefore, and Chazal tell us that really there was nothing special about the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge, and the other trees, except that God, bitter waters are sweeter, and people, and they went after doing something which is forbidden. But fundamentally, Chazal tell us if they would have waited a little longer, this tree would have been permitted also. So some say there was something special about it. It's the fact that they waited too soon. That they didn't wait. They ate it too soon. And therefore, what the minhag is based on is, we know the esrog is asur the whole sukkot. However, so right after sukkot is over, the first opportunity, the woman takes a bite out of the esrog or has some esrog jam and says, God, take it easy on me in pregnancy, because if I was there, I went to sin. Because why? Because that esrog was so delicious to me, but I waited the whole time until after Sukkot to eat it. So too, if I would have been by the Eitz Hadas, I would have waited till it became mutter. So that's the minhag of a woman eating from the esrog after Sukkot. But we see the Meshech Chachma says originally women were obligated because there was no pain. It's only once the pain came into, women were exempt. So this is the Brisker Rav. The Brisker Rav says, "In Cain Lama Ze'anochi, why do I need it? What was the problem with Chizkiyo? What was the taina?" As the Gemara says, the Bahadi Kivsha the Rachmana Lamacha. Why do you concern yourself with the hidden things of God? The Bifkad Aribayu Cholamevad. What you are commanded to do, you must do. Umadenecha Kame Kusha the Brichul Avid. What is found to be good. In other words, only because he was commanded. What he said made sense, except it's not for you to make cheshbonos. The Torah says to do it, end of discussion. But Lama Ze'anochi, the Brit was saying, but me, Rivka, why did I go through all this pain? I'm not commanded. If I'm going to see, I'm going to have Esav HaRasha, who needs this? And therefore I'd rather not have any kids. So it's a good time, and then the Torah goes on explaining, don't worry, it's not one child, it's not a schizophrenic that he runs from one place to tell Yohan Navi said there's nothing worse that they serve God in the morning and they serve the Baal in the afternoon, either worship. So she said, don't worry, Shnei Goyim and there's going to be two different nations, etc. And that appeased Rivka. So that's the pshat of the Brisker Rav of Lama Ze'anochi, that really it was a good taina by Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Except you're commanded, so we don't understand everything. But Rivka, who was only doing it, B'Torah Eina Mitzvah Yoseh, who was not commanded, so therefore she said, Lama Ze'anochi. In fact, it's not so simple. But even though it is simple, halacha, that a woman is exempt from the mitzvah of Pru Ravu. However, there's another mitzvah. Speaking of Yeshaya, in Yeshaya there's a mitzvah of Lasheves Yitzera. There's a mitzvah to populate the world. And therefore, we assume women, and perhaps as women as well as Gentiles, are obligated in this mitzvah of populating the world, not the technical. There's a lot more details to the mitzvah of Pru Ravu, a boy and a girl, but Sheves is any child, even one child, even 10 girls, 10 boys. But so Tosas and Gin has two opinions on whether a woman is obligated in the mitzvah in Yeshaya of Lasheres to populate the world. So what's the issue, whether she is or she isn't? So the issue is, it depends how do we view the mitzvah of Sheves. Is the mitzvah of Sheves an independent mitzvah? Nothing to do with Pru Ravu. It's an independent mitzvah, you have to populate the world. If that's the case, a woman should be obligated. But if Sheves is an extension of the mitzvah of Pru Ravu, it's a chelak, it's part of the mitzvah of Pru Ravu. So just like a woman is exempt from Pru Ravu, she's exempt as well from Sheves. So that's a discussion 2 days in Tosas on whether a woman is exempt from Sheves. And even if you assume that she is exempt from Sheves, the Ran in Kedushin says maybe there's another reason a woman is obligated to have kids. Because it's like we have a principle, aiding and abetting, many times it's used in the negative, a Messiah l'dvar avera, that you aid and abet someone in doing a sin. But there's also a concept, Messiah l'dvar mitzvah, aiding and abetting someone to do a mitzvah. So the Ran writes, it's true she might be technically patur from Pru Ravu, she is, and maybe even Sheves. However, perhaps, but she's involved in the mitzvah of helping a husband perform them. Obviously the husband can't do the mitzvah without her, and therefore she's a Messiah l'dvar mitzvah. In fact, interesting, some point out a similar concept by Simchas Yantif. There's a whole discussion also, right? We give Eger, whether a woman is obligated in Simchas Yantif, having a Suda, Miel's Yantif, and being involved in Simcha. So, at some point out the same thing, even if she wouldn't, we assume she probably is, but even if she wasn't, what kind of Simcha is for the husband to be without the wife and the child, and how could the wife be happy without the children, the husband? So therefore, even if she's not technically obligated, she'd have a mitzvah, Messiah l'dvar mitzvah, some say by Birkas Kohanim. Birkas Kohanim, we all know the mitzvah is for a Kohen to bless the people. So we all know there's a mitzvah on the Kohen to bless the people. What we don't realize, according to some, is, when the implication is, that the mitzvah on me to show up in shul, so the Kohen has someone to bless. Just like there's a mitzvah for a Kohen to bless the people, there's a mitzvah on me and the people that they should be blessed. So even though the Brisker Rav is right from Lama Ze'anochi, she's not obligated in Pru Ravu. However, perhaps in Sheves she is obligated, even if not, maybe Messiah. And there are other reasons, other pshatim anyway, not for now, Lama Ze'anochi. So we'll stop here and we'll continue with Toldos later. Parshas Toldos begins with Yitzchak marrying Rivka, and they couldn't have children. So Vayarta Yitzchak Hashem v'Noach Ishto. So both Rashi quotes from the Chazal, from our rabbis, that both Yitzchak and Rivka prayed that they should become pregnant. As Chazal tell us, that the reason why he made the most pregnant or the most barren is because he's mis'avel tfilasan shel tzadikim. He loves to get the tefillah of the righteous. So we see Yitzchak and Rivka both praying for the child. So the Torah goes on and says, Vatar Rivka Ishto. The tefillahs worked, the prayers worked, and Rivka became pregnant. Vayitzrotazu abanim bekirba. And she was having a difficult pregnancy. Vayizrotazu akrat, they're running inside. As we mentioned, Yaakov ran, tried to jump out when he got past the yeshiva, and Esav ran when there was a house of idol worship. So it's interesting. There's an interesting question raised: is when does the father-child relationship begin? In other words, does it begin at conception, or it doesn't begin until birth? In fact, it reminds me of a joke I saw once. It had three people. There was a minister, a liberal, and a teenager. And they were discussing, when does life begin? So the liberal said, well, of course, life begins at conception. It's my body, I can do what I want with it, and basically life begins at conception. I mean, that's the minister. The life begins at conception. And the other individual said, no, life doesn't begin until childbirth. And the teenager said, life doesn't begin until you get your driver's license. So whenever life begins, at birth or conception, but so we in Judaism believe life begins at conception. We don't view the fetus the same way we view a human being, albeit abortion is prohibited. It's a biblical prohibition, abortion, and you can't do it, but it's not the same as if you murder a living being, because that's a full nefesh. So, and one who murders a living being, a human being, is liable to capital punishment. But one who murders a fetus, he violates the prohibition of murder, but you don't have the same punishment. So we see in halacha, a fetus isn't viewed as the same as a human, yet nevertheless we assume a fetus is a viable being, and life begins at conception, and a full birth is at the birth. So what do we see from this pasuk? It says, "Vayitzrotzu habanim bekirba," and when Esav and the fetuses were inside, we see the pasuk calls them banim, implying that they're already children now, that the child-parent relationship begins right away. Vayitzrotzu habanim bekirba. So I think the Eben Ezra writes, no, it's Al Shema Asid. So what is he getting at there? It's not going on the future. So let's go check a couple of sources and see, when does life begin? Does life begin, or does the parent-child relationship begin at birth or at conception? So there's a prohibition in the Torah also as benogos ushchatu b'yom echad. There's a prohibition, you can't slaughter a cow and its child on the same day. Also as beno, the cow and its son on the same day. So what happens if you slaughter the cow and he's dead. And then afterwards you find inside, you find an Uber. You find you found that the cow gave birth. Afterwards, like the child came out after he was dead already. So the question is, are you letting now slaughter this cow? So it depends. If the father-son relationship begins at conception, so then it'd be in violation of also as Beno. It's considered that person's son, and therefore you can't do it. However, if the relationship begins at birth, and the person was dead before, so therefore it's not related, so to speak, and therefore one we permitted. Or as Rabbi Kiva Eger points out, the Torah tells us, "Osavasho gadi b'chalavimo." We know it says it 3 times in the Torah. One to teach me you can't cook, one to teach me you can't eat, one to teach me you can't get benefit. So they point out that Rabbi Kiva Eger points out, based on sources, that what type of milk is asur? Only b'chalav imo, only a cow that has the ability to have children. In other words, we have a tradition, a treifa, somebody who, a cow that's going to die within 12 months. So the halach is treifa eino molid, a treifa can't give birth. However, you can milk the cow. So therefore, Rabbi Kiva Eger says, ulai, perhaps, that the milk of this cow is permitted, and therefore you could have real basa v'cholov, not the fake milk and meat, but if you could start a farm with this treifa cows, and that they're not going to have the ability to become parents, they can't have children, so Rabbi Kiva Eger has the chiddush that perhaps the milk is not it's not us. The issue is only to go sabasho gadi b'chalav imo. Or we have the case they discuss in the famous case of the wife of a Kohen. We know the Torah tells us a Kohen cannot come in contact with the dead, and it can't come in contact with the corpse. It can't go to a cemetery. What happens if it's a wife of a Kohen? So a wife of a Kohen can go in. The daughter of a Kohen can go into a cemetery. And moral Kohanim b'nei Aaron v'lo benos Aaron. That the issue is that the sons of Aaron and not the daughters of Aaron. So they point out, what happens if the daughter of a priest is pregnant? Could she go into a cemetery? So the earlier commentators right. Yes, you're permitted based on the following principle that we know. Savik d'oraisu chumra, doubt regarding a biblical law we're strict on. A doubt regarding a rabbinical law we're lenient on. However, a double doubt on a biblical law we're also lenient on. So here it's a double doubt. Maybe the woman is the wife of a Kohen, is pregnant. We know she's pregnant. Maybe it's a boy, maybe it's a girl. And even if it's a boy, maybe it won't live to fruition. And therefore it's a svek, it's a double doubt. And therefore it'd be permitted. So the question is, does she have to go? So no, the Yehuda discusses, in a case where you could you clarify a sveka? If you could clarify the doubts, are you obligated to? In other words, today we have sonograms, so you could tell if it's a man or a girl or a boy. So the question is she obligated to take a sonogram test to find out before she wants to go in? So no, Yehuda writes, no. Only if you could clarify both doubts. Since you only could clarify if it's a boy or a girl, you don't know if it's going to live, so therefore you wouldn't be obligated to take a sonogram to go in. However, let's say you did find out, and you know, so therefore today it should be prohibited because there's only one doubt, and we know it's a boy inside. So Safek Taraisa L'Chumra. There should be a doubt regarding a biblical law we're strict on. There's no double doubt anymore because we know there's only one doubt, and therefore it's a classic example. Does Jewish law change? It's a classic example where the principles change, the principles don't change, but the application changed. So hundreds of years ago, before sonograms it would be usher. Today, if you found out the sex of the baby, it would be usher. However, the question is there any way to say that even if we took a sonogram, even if you know it's a boy inside, are you still permitted, the wife of a Kohen, to go to a cemetery? So that's what some Achronim discuss, that perhaps it depends on this question. When does the father-son relationship begin? So, if you assume it begins at conception, so then you have a problem. However, if you assume that the child and the fetus, the relation of a father or son doesn't begin until birth, so therefore this fetus is not a Kohen yet, and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to go in. So that's a major question we're not going into now in terms of halacha l'maisa. Halacha l'maisa, anyway, bottom line is the minig is that pregnant woman, even Yisrael or Levi, the custom is, barring any specific need, that a pregnant woman does not go in. However, so therefore, even if it's an Ashes, so certainly if it's an Ashes Kohen, it's not such a big, that Ashes Kohen is more of a halachic problem, or a potential halachic problem. Any other pregnant women are permitted to go in, the minig is for them not to go in. And therefore we could argue perhaps the child is not a Kohen, because the father-son relationship doesn't begin until childbirth. And that's what, so from this pasuk, for Yitzhak Banim B'Kirba, this is a simple literal explanation, seems to say that the Banim right away. However, Mefarshim give different reasons to explain the language, and therefore it's dependent on this issue, on at what point do they become your child? Is that conception or birth? So we gave a couple of practical differences, whether the prohibition of oso es beno, lo tishchatu, if they find a baby cow alive after the father died, after the mother died, so therefore if he was born after the birth, so therefore there's no connection to the child. Or we see by Rabbi Kiva Ega, by the prohibition of basar v'chalav, of milk and meat, that it doesn't begin, you need v'chalav imo, so maybe a treifah's milk is okay to have with meat. That would be the issue. And similarly here, the issue whether the wife of a Kohen could go in, even if you find that it's a boy, because perhaps maybe the child doesn't become a Kohen until after birth.